just make sure we know who's here. See, I'll just go down. Bill?
Yep, here.
Bridget?
Here.
Ellen?
Here.
Child? Kristen Riot?
Riot.
Oh my gosh, I know that's how it is. I'm so sorry, Kristen.
Don't worry. You're not the
Please
first
forgive
and
me.
you won't be the last.
I always question myself. Okay.
It's like Marriott, Robin.
Okay, Ria.
That might help.
Ria. All right. I can remember that. Michael Kelly.
Here.
Tom.
Yes, here.
Favor. And then Angela said she could not make it. Beth Polly on yet?
She just texted me to tell me she's going to be a few minutes late.
Okay. All right, I think that's everyone. So I guess first up is our pardon me while I bring up the agenda again. Minutes from last meeting. So did anyone have any questions or concerns about the minutes?
Do you need me to show those or are you okay?
Do we usually show them?
No, I'm just asking if folks would like to see it, I could certainly post them, but otherwise, yeah, you can continue.
Okay. If not, then I'd like to move that we approve the minutes from November.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Passes. Next on the agenda, we have public comments. So this meeting today, we have a time right now. If anyone who's on the call would like to give a short public comment, but like we've been doing the last couple of meetings, we'll be monitoring the chat as well as we go through. So if you have anything you'd like to bring up at this time, please raise your hand. And I don't see anyone. Oh,
Adam
I
has his
see
hand
Adam
up.
Rossi
Adam
is
Rossi.
raising his hand.
Hey,
Adam, would you like to take yourself off mute?
can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Cool. Thanks. Just want to say hi. Adam Rossi, and I live and work at Jerusalem Farm in the northeast of Kansas City. But I just wanted to thank you for including me in the call. I'm just excited to. I've never been in one of these before, but I'm just excited to hear like what you guys talk about and see how this goes. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Adam. Emily?
Hi, thank you all. I was one question, and this might be on the agenda, sorry if it is. At the last Environmental Management Commission meeting, the city manager's office presented about the economic incentives policy, the updated one they're working on. And we had done some research for something else, so had provided just the cities after that. So I'm glad they presented just some general info. So I was curious if the Climate Protection Plan Steering Committee was going to submit like feedback as well. They said it's going to go to committee on January 12th and they'll take public comment. So I was just curious because unfortunately I know there's they said that I think 21 members on the committee and I know Casey Tennants is on it. But I was just curious if the committee, especially those who are, experts in the building side, plan on giving feedback like I said we did and we'll continue. Just wanted to curious. I think it would be good if you guys did. That was more the why I asked.
Michael, I don't know if you're more knowledgeable on this than the rest of us being on the committee, but could you maybe fill us in as to what's going on with that and what is the opportunity to get involved?
I'll try to fill in as much as I can, but I think Andy might actually have some more information than I do. But as I understand it, the city is trying to update their advanced KC guidelines, and one of the groups that they had requested to kind of meet with and receive additional feedback from was the Climate Protection Steering Committee. And so the information was shared with the group, and there was a suggestion for additional feedback. I can't remember what the specific timeline is, but I think there was at least an opportunity. There is at least an opportunity for our committee and possibly even the Environmental Management Commission to weigh in and provide additional feedback on considerations for related policies as it kind of intertwines with sustainability going forward. So Emily, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I think just like I said, we provided comments, and I think the more that people can give recommendations first, like requiring certain sustainability measures, would be great. And I don't know if that falls under climate protection plan, like you're under your something you guys could do. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's more Environmental Management Commission. I don't know. Just wanted to bring it to attention. Was curious.
Yeah, and just and that's kind of the beauty of having Michael as the liaison between the commission and the steering committee, is to kind of help represent the interests of the steering committee. So there is still time, of course, if the steering committee chose to get deeper into that. Where we are is the EMC did form a subcommittee to kind of put together some recommendations. That is still underway, and I suppose if the steering committee wanted to get more involved, we could try to work something out. But at this point, the EMC subcommittee is going to work on putting together 3 or 4 policy recommendations for submittal to Carrie Tyndall for her consideration.
And the timeline for that is the 12th?
That's when Carrie's going in front of council or in front of committee for that. So we would actually be submitting something sooner than that, probably next week sometime or the week after.
Okay.
And Andy, remind me, is that going to be in front of the Finance, Governance, and Public Safety Committee, or is it going to be a different committee?
Yeah, I can't say for sure. I don't recall which one it will be. I would suspect it's probably going to be Finance and Governance.
So given the timeline there, would it be possible for them to let us see a draft of their policy statements, or what makes sense?
Sure. So currently we have a draft of the policy, the advanced KC policy. I could certainly distribute that. Pretty much what I supplied to the EMC, I could provide it to the steering committee, and just trying to think of what would be the best way. I suppose one thing you could do is if you submitted comments back to me, then I could provide those to the EMC committee to help kind of coordinate all that together in one document, if that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that, Robin. Do any of the other committee members have any issue with that potential approach? Robin, do we need to have a formal motion to kind of do that as our action step, or?
I'm not sure. I guess I could go ahead and make a motion to have OEQ share the draft policy with the committee, and send any feedback individual committee members have back to Andy.
So Michael Kelly, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up. Emily.
Mhm.
Any?
Oh, Robin, I think you muted yourself.
Yes, I did. Sorry about that. Anyone else for public comment at this time? Okay, like I said, we'll, Andy, who's monitoring the chat? Do we need to have someone assigned to monitor the chat?
I can monitor the chat while Laura's doing the presentation until Rachel comes back.
Okay, great.
I'm
Okay,
here.
well, oh,
Oh, Rachel,
oh, she's here. Okay, good. Well, with that, we could move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an update on the climate protection steering, protection and resiliency plan. And Laura will be leading us off with that information. So I'll turn it over to Laura if she's ready to go.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Last week, we held our strategy prioritization sessions for each of the 6 areas of the plan. I was glad to see a lot of the steering committee members in attendance for that. For those that were not able to attend one of the strategy sessions, the spreadsheets are still open for steering committee members to make additions or comments as they see fit. So just for those that weren't involved in the process before, we have our various strategies here. I've chosen homes and buildings just as an example. Can you all see this? Everybody see my spreadsheet? Okay. All right. So under each strategy, we had our potential supporting actions that were in here. Looks like there's some comments on here. So, and what we were trying to fill out in the spreadsheets were mainly these areas over here, which is what existing and related efforts are already out there that we can leverage on each of these actions for these strategies. And then we were also working to find the sequencing. Should we be doing this near term? Should we wait to do it midterm because the technology isn't there or the political will isn't there? And then late term towards the end of the plan, of course, finishing everything up by 2040. If you have any ideas or any changes, please put comments. If you do go in and edit the spreadsheet, which I will drop in chat here in a minute. Actually, I can go ahead and, well, no, I can't. I'll do it as soon as I close this out so you guys can actually get into it. But
I'll try. Yeah, I know this thing is pretty hard for you. Yeah, it's pretty difficult, you know. Not to like.
And could anyone who's not muted, please mute? We're getting some conversation.
You behave though out there. Oh, have fun. I'll get it. I'm trying to find her, Laura.
Okay.
Hold on.
All right. So the other things we were looking at in these are we're finding implementation leaders, names, and organizations of particular entities that would be interested in taking on some of these supported actions. The city probably can't lead a whole lot of these with a small staff. And so if you or your organization thinks you are in a position where you could be an implementation leader, we would love to have you drop that in chat or in the spreadsheet as well. If you know of an organization that could be a potential leader, please drop that in as well. What being an implementation leader means, it doesn't mean that you have to have the staffing, the funding, and the resources to lead it right now. But as this process moves forward, your organization is a leader or already working in this area. Putting your name on here does not mean you can take this on tomorrow and we're going to hand it to you. It means through partnership, we're going to work to find the resources that are needed to move that particular action forward. If you also have any implementation partners, those can be dropped in the spreadsheet, possible partnerships that could help move this supporting action forward. And then a big part we wanted to fill out here are there barriers to equitable implementation of these? And if there are, we want to make sure that we have those listed in here so we can try to mitigate any of that before it actually happens. And then if there's a funding opportunity that you might know about to support this particular action, you can drop that in as well. And then any implementation notes on a particular item that would not necessarily be directly related to equity, but maybe something that you know about that's going on that's a barrier to this implementation or something that could assist with the implementation. So that's kind of where the strategy spreadsheets are. Again, as I said, please don't delete anything. You could add your comments as you see fit. If you see something in here and you don't agree with it, you can actually go in the spreadsheet and just say, actually, we need to do this way. That's fine too, but don't delete anything that's already there. These are working documents, and we're trying to make sure that we capture everybody's ideas in here. So I will go ahead and drop that link in chat. All of the various, now that I can actually see chat again, all of the various spreadsheet tabs are at the bottom for each individual action area. So if you aren't interested in homes and buildings, you can click over to the other ones as well and add to those strategies. Right now, Brindle is working on the short-term implementation plan based on what we heard in those sessions. And that's those things that are near term, the things that we've decided we want to work on quickly. And that's going to include our various toolkits to help us work through that, and also a financial analysis of costs for those particular items. Some of those sessions were less productive than others. So if you go in and you see some holes in that spreadsheet, we'd be happy to have you fill them in for us. As for the plan, the draft plan is about 90% complete right now. Brindle is filling in a few gaps on the plan, and it will come to the city and the CPSC for review sometime around early to mid-January. And then you guys will have hopefully a week plus to review it. And then any questions you have can be brought up during the January 24th meeting. That will be the meeting that Brindle's actually going to be present to answer your questions. And then that's mostly planned content. We will talk through the design in the new year after we've all had a chance to look at the content and kind of weigh in on that. And then we'll weigh in on design after that. We're almost complete with the outreach and engagement summary and metrics on how we did engagement. And Idalia is working on finalizing that right now, getting a draft to the city. And that's going to have what worked well during our engagement process and what we should continue during implementation, because it was obviously great. And then those things that didn't work so well during our outreach process that we should probably try to find a different way to approach community. Also, I sent out today the strategy analysis appendix to the plan that just kind of says how these metrics were, how Brindle put together the metrics for determining the return on investment for some of these. And also that kind of the GHG emissions reduction, where they got that information. I forwarded that on to the Climate Protection Steering Committee today. If you are you happen to have been on the email list to receive that because you were in one of the strategy sessions, you are welcome to weigh in on that as well, and then get any edits back to me or Becca if she sent it directly to you, preferably by first week of January. The greenhouse gas inventory has been completed for a while, but we were still working on QA/QC of that. The vulnerability analysis is also done, and city is working on QA/QC. And pending final review of those documents by us, we'll then send it out to you all for your input. And then I think that's about where we stand on the plan. I know there were some questions on the scorecard for the plan, and I think we can answer that because I think Robin had a list of things she wanted to discuss, and that was one of the things in your list. Is that correct, Robin? Okay, so I can go ahead and turn it over for any questions at this point. Thank you, Jerry. I will change that.
Questions, but I would like to give others a chance to go first if anyone would like to. Okay, well then I will go ahead and kick us off with that. So I haven't fully processed the document that what you mentioned that was sent today yet, Laura, but I did want to just highlight a couple things and say, based on what I've seen in there so far, that the good news is that it, from what, and correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but it seems that Brendel believes that it's technically possible with technology we have today to reduce our emissions from where they are in 2021, which I don't have those exact numbers in those documents, but it looks like it's somewhere around 8.8 million tons of CO2 per year, down to 1 megaton of CO2 by 2040. So that's, almost 90% of our emissions they anticipate could be cut by 2040 without any sequestration or offsets, if I'm reading that all correctly. So to me, that seems like good news. And I also see that they believe that it's possible to achieve our goal of 100% renewable electricity by 2030. Is that something, do you agree with that, Laura? Did I get that right?
Yeah. I mean, it depends, of course, on Evergy and where they go, but it is definitely
Technically
feasible.
feasible, I guess I should say.
Technically feasible.
Okay. And I see that they are suggesting we adjust our 2025 target. And so that's one thing I wanted to bring up is our current targets and discuss as a committee whether we think, and with OEQ, based on what's happening with the plan, if we might think about increasing our ambitions around the target. So I think right now the 2025 target is actually higher than our emissions of where we are today. And that Brendel's suggesting reducing it by a bit more than that. But I guess if I step back and, think about if we're around 8.5 today, does that sound about right, Laura?
I have to look that up, to be honest.
Okay. I didn't see the exact number in what we got sent so far, but that's from the graph, kind of what it looked like. If our goal is to zero out electricity emissions by 2030, and our electricity emissions are almost 50%, could we set a goal that was closer to, to align with that, that amount of reductions? So, I mean, if we're at 8.5 now and we reduced by about half just from electricity alone, could we, set a new 2030 goal of 4 megatons CO2? I guess I'd like to open that up for any discussion amongst the committee. See if anyone has any. Let me actually.
I was going to say, Robin, it looks like Bridget and Kristen both have questions that they wanted to ask as well.
Okay.
Do we want to let them ask their questions first, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Actually, I was just going to say, sorry to butt in, but mine's
Yes.
actually relevant. So I know that this draft that we got today is based off of 2019 numbers because 2020, of course, wasn't a regular year. I'm curious, do we have numbers for 2021? I haven't been able to comb through this exact report to see any numbers.
We don't have numbers for 2021 because it's not over yet. So we have to wait till the end of the year for everybody to aggregate their data and get it out to EPA and such before we can get those total numbers.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of what I assumed, but I was just.
So I was on the graph that Brendel shared with us that was, interpolating what they estimated emissions in 2021.
Yeah, the total emissions for 2019 were about 8.6.
Okay. So if I could just share something. I'm sorry, Kristen, why don't you go ahead first?
It's okay. I'm going to flag an issue a little bit later after you finish this discussion. So I'll take my hand down for now and put it back up.
Okay. So I just threw together, because I think having a graph might help illustrate this. Now I've lost the meeting. Okay. Laura, is it all right if I just share my screen for a second?
Of course.
Okay.
Mine's not still shared, is it?
No, I don't think so. So I threw together just rough numbers based on the what Brendel sent. Can you guys see this graph?
Yes.
And it's just showing what I think we have as our current goals from the 2005 resolution, where we're at about 8 point something. And then it rises up and then goes down, to 0 in 2040. So what I'm proposing is that we set targets that I think are achievable based on what I've seen so far with the plan, for a new target around 6 for 2025 and around 4 for 2030. And that's based mostly just on switching to clean electricity, and then kind of keeping the same path down to 2040. So that's one, I guess, proposal I have based on what we've seen so far that seems to me like it's in line with what Brendel is saying is possible. And I just feel like that's what our plan should be, working towards is what's possible. And if there's not political will or policies in place yet to make that happen, that's where we focus our efforts. So with that, I'll stop sharing and see if anyone disagrees or has other thoughts, but let's see, when I stop sharing. I see, Kristen, is that your hand up?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So Robin, if I can restate what you've said so that I fully understand it. You're saying that we would make the goals. I think we're all in agreement that we want to get to these goals as fast as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that we could achieve beyond what is being shown in this graph simply based on greater conversion of the electricity to renewables? So there would be no, in essence, there would be no additional city action except in negotiating with Evergy. Is that accurate?
Well, not in. Okay, let me make sure I'm speaking accurately. So, if we zero out, our electricity emissions by 2030, based on the greenhouse gas inventory that we've seen now, that gets us to 4.8 in 2030. So I was suggesting we set a target of 4 because we know there are going to be other city, efforts aside from that. But yes, to just electricity alone would get us from around 8.6 to 4.8.
Okay, so
answer
you
it?
are saying that incremental action would be needed to go from 4.8 to 4, correct?
Yes.
And do we have, I'm sorry, does Laura's document show the value of each of those incremental actions in terms of the total emissions tonnage?
There are some numbers in what we've seen so far, right, Laura? But
yeah, there are some numbers as far as, I mean, we don't have it, there's kind of a sliding scale on how those numbers are calculated. So there's, if we just did kind of the bare minimum versus if we did like industry best practice, and the GHG emissions change depending on that sliding scale, because there's all kinds of levels within there in which we could kind of move around. I just wanted to, Robin, do you mind if I weigh in on this at this
absolutely.
point?
Yeah.
So the targets that we have now were set by resolution 200005 back when we did that. And so I'm just kind of wondering what the value would be in setting new ones versus just beating what we have. And I say that just because if we've got these targets now and we are above the science-based target for 2030 a little bit. It's actually more like 6. And I can share that on our screen, on my screen real quick. So this is kind of our sort of where we are and where we plan to be. And these little, I know this is kind of small. I don't know if you guys can see this. So the science-based targets are the little diamonds that are here and here. So we are a little high on 2030, but we're above the science-based targets, which would get us there by 2050, which this is kind of how everything aligns. So we're still on a trajectory to beat the 2050 targets. 2030 science-based would put us at about 6 per capita here. Since 6 metric tons of CO2, there we go, per capita here by 2030. So we're a little above that. But if we change it, so are you thinking that we're gonna have to do a new resolution, bring it before council? There's a lot of administrative stuff behind that process, since that's the target that was done with the plan.
I guess I hear where you're coming from on the resolution. I guess my thought was we could take this plan to the council and say, we think we can beat the targets in the initial resolution based on the analysis and the greenhouse gas inventory, and sort of seek their approval at that time. I mean, they can always say no. They want to go back to the old targets, but I feel like with the strong support we got for that resolution, that setting stronger, and there was even some comments by some of the council members at that time that they would be open for even stronger targets, that it seems like that would be in line with their values. But
so my feeling would be that if we can accompany a more stringent and a more robust target with the specific actions that it would take to achieve that, it's a much stronger argument than if we just go and ask, for them to move the target. So, and I feel like, Robin, you sent us a note earlier today asking about principles that we should use. And I think one of the principles should be that these specific actions are accompanied by even a rough estimate of what the emissions reduction would be for these actions. And I don't want to make the Office of Environmental Quality's life miserable trying to quantify all of that. I know it's a big challenge, but we do need to be focusing on where we can get the biggest emissions reduction fastest and for the funding that we have to do it. And I'm gonna drop my hand one more time, but I still have one other kind of an equity issue to raise at a little bit later point, so I'll come back. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, I'm trying to capture any principles that we have as we go along. So if I heard you right, that one principle is that you'd like each strategy to show the amount of potential emission reductions. Is that correct?
Well, that would be in an ideal world, and I know we can't always do that, but where it's possible, I think for us to know where the relative impacts are would be really powerful in helping us to recommend to the city what it should be doing, what it should be focusing on first, and how it should be spending its money. So, Robin, rather than continue to do this hand business, can I just mention the specific issue that I have in mind? And this is something that Bill Griffith and I have talked about a little bit, and that is our interest in electrification and heat pump technology. And that is if you have your heating and cooling currently done by conventional electricity, and you convert these conventional electric appliances like an electric furnace to heat pump technology, you can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 65%, something as much as 2/3. So it's very, very attractive technology to adopt where you already have electrical appliances that can be replaced. However, where you're converting from gas furnaces to heat pumps, it becomes a much more mixed picture. The greenhouse gases don't reduce nearly as much, if at all. And I just want to bring to the attention of our board that there is a particular impact in terms for low-income households that it would be possible for utility bills can be increased in the wintertime if we convert from gas furnaces to heat pump furnaces. So it's one of the rare situations, I have found rare situations where what's the right thing to do for the climate is not necessarily the right thing to do for a particular population. And it's just something that's on our minds very much at Bridging the Gap. So that's what I was raising my hand and unraising my hand about. But Bill comments here in the chat, and he's right, that air conditioning would be cheaper because that's almost always an electric appliance. And if you had a heat pump, you would be doing your air conditioning less expensively with heat pump technology. Did I make myself clear, Robin? I'm sorry, that's pretty complicated. And I've got actually a little white paper on it that I can share.
Yeah, and I hope that we will be having more discussions like this as we look at how it makes sense to implement, and that we're mindful of those equity concerns. So I appreciate that. I'm not sure who had their hand up next. I see Michael Kelly, but was somebody else first?
That was just me, Robin, and Andy dropped in chat. Just if we do the update as part of the climate plan adoption, we can roll the new target into that resolution when we adopt the climate plan. And administratively, that means we won't have to go through. It's a lot for us to put a resolution in, lots of hours of time on our end. So if we decide to update the targets and roll them into that resolution to adopt the plan, then that makes it a lot easier on OEQ.
Yeah. Okay.
That was all I was going to say.
Great.
Laura, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for organizing the various work groups. I sat in on the mobility one, and I think that it was pretty well attended and everything. One question, I guess, kind of to clarify, is with regards to the some of the mobility stuff. Is there, and I didn't see this, but in terms of electric vehicles, is there any current conversations around if there would be a potential cutoff for potential support or something like that from the city in terms of potential support or something like that?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Support for EVs on a residential scale, or?
Yes, I apologize for being confusing on that.
That's okay. There's a lot going on in these strategies. So at this point, there's nothing in place at this point because right now we're just writing the plan. But one of the supporting actions was promote community-wide electric vehicle adoption through education, incentives, and EV-ready codes. And that's going to be something that's going to happen at the city level. So once we get the plan adopted and we have the teeth behind us, then that's something we'll have to start looking into from a how do we fund this. We've got Metropolitan Energy Centers on board with helping with that. And then we've got to work through with city planning and see what they're already doing in that area. We haven't had our city folks weighing in as much on these strategies just because it's bad timing for a lot of city folks doing other plans. So they haven't been showing up to the meetings. So.
And I totally understand that. Just one thing I just wanted to push for, and I think I probably mentioned this at some point in the strategy meeting as well, is just making sure that when we're talking about electric vehicles, we are expanding that to also include electric bicycles as well. I mean, electric vehicles have their place, but I know I've said this before with this group that an overemphasis on electric vehicles is not going to be as effective as working to reduce the number of car trips in general across the board. And that is an equity element that we need to consider, especially for the thousands of households in Kansas City that don't have access to a car. So thank you. And I just wanted to make that point again. So.
I agree 100%. And that was one of the things that got added to the implementation notes on that for that particular strategy was explicitly include e-bikes, EV codes for existing development, EV repair support. All of those things were pointed out. So it will definitely be included in that strategy as things we're going to need to know for implementation.
Okay. Thank you again, Laura.
Okay, are there any other hands raised this time?
I did just want to note the other comments. Just make sure everyone's able to see those from Layla and Kelly with regards to fleet vehicles and mass transit. Thank you for those comments.
And I'm just trying to catch up with those myself. Okay. Any other hands up at this time? I'm trying to bounce back and forth between the chat and the participants. So another thing that came to mind about after the last week of workshops or so was and I think this is answered by Brindle, but I just wanted to make sure that the idea of using offsets. So for the last 10% of emissions that we are not sure can be reduced at this time by 2040. I think Brindle says we would talk about, we would have to decide whether to purchase offsets for that or wait for new technologies. So I guess my question is just, is the city leaning one way or another in the plan with that right now, or is that something we would discuss down the road? Just want a little bit.
Yeah, that's something, that's why this is a living document, and we made that quite clear, and we're gonna make that quite clear in the plan, because some of these things, even that we choose today as our best action strategies, might be obsolete in a year based on new technology. So at this point, there's this, I think it's an 11% gap on what we can get to with the strategies we have and what we need to reach our carbon neutrality goals. So, and that's that's common in some plans, that we still haven't figured this piece out yet. So that's something that the work of this Climate Protection Steering Committee and OAQ is going to be ongoing, and identifying where those particular items are, and identifying those new technologies. And I mean, obviously carbon offsets are like last ditch effort. I'm not a fan myself. So, but at this point, it's just kind of, we just aren't there yet on knowing what that other 11% will be.
Yeah, and I was actually, I mean, I was glad to see Brindle say that it was mostly what did they say? It was the heavy duty trucks that made up a big part of that, and also some types of buildings that are going to be hard to move off of natural gas. But I was encouraged that, you know, that was the rest of it they thought was feasible. So.
Yeah, there are some industries out there that are just natural gas heavy as well, that are going to be an issue to fully get us there.
Okay.
I think it's just kind of a let's see where we are in 10 years and reevaluate.
Okay. I have one more thing, but if anyone else wants to go in between.
I just wanted to just acknowledge some more of the comments in the chat. So thank you again for everyone who's dropping the stuff in. We appreciate the additional input from everyone. It is helping us to better shape all of this and kind of take this feedback and use it a little bit more effectively.
All right. So I guess the other thing I just wanted to say was that I hope that that our plan and our goals and our, I hope that this plan kind of helps put out there what our vision is for our future here in Kansas City. And I would hope that we can work with Evergy, especially during this IRP process coming up, to have the goals outlined in this plan be incorporated as at least one scenario in their IRP. Because part of the problem I think we have today is that we haven't seen a comparison of, in one of their IRPs for these types of targets. So I just wanted to put that out there as, proposed guiding principle for this is that we view this plan as what we are hoping to see and what we'd like to see as Kansas Cityans, and work with our utilities to work through how to feasibly make that happen in a way that's equitable to our communities too, and doesn't increase utility burdens. So does that, I guess, Laura, do you have any, or anyone else, have any feedback on that? Or is that kind of what you envision this plan could be as well?
Well, this is Ellen with Evergy. I mean, obviously, we look forward to continuing to work with the city and the committee to help meet, the needs of the city and things that we can incorporate into our IRP process. We definitely will work with you as we prepare that, and would like to do that collaboratively. And we have a couple folks participating in today's meeting, obviously, to continue to stay abreast and up to speed on what, the committee's goals are so that we can help the city achieve their goals.
I think that I thought Bridget had her hand up, but maybe she put it down. So
I did, but then I panicked because I was trying to look for the thing. I second Robin's comment that this is a way to work collaboratively. I think that it's also important to think about it at the state level, just because looking through this draft plan, the climate vision number 3, carbon electricity by 2030 makes me nervous, just because Missouri likes to put policies in place that make it very hard for cities to do things. So I just wanted to second Robin's thought as well.
All right, thanks, Bridget. Let's see if there's anything. I'm having trouble with my chat updating.
I think the most recent comment, Jerry, I just wanted to make sure everyone was able to see. He notes that Kansas City has approximately 220,000 residential units, a large majority of which are over 15 years old and built under older codes. Plus, many are occupied by renters. The question of achieving targets of necessity comes down to a range of combinable incentives, rebates, low interest loans, grants, sweat equity, etc. The city has historically used state and federal funds and not city funds. This needs study for strategic and tactics and resources.
So I guess, Laura, where I was kind of going with that was that I in looking through what Brendel sent, I saw that they had included Evergy's current commitments, but I just wonder if we need to adjust the wording at all to, for the possibility that, by working with Evergy, they will, change their commitments or update their commitments to more closely align with our goals.
Yeah, so what you're talking about is the scenario analysis, which is just the appendix to the plan, which is how they assumed we were going to reach where we reach based on what's currently in the IRP. The plan itself can definitely be more visionary as far as what we want to do and what we'd like to see changed. When that would be in the body of the plan itself, not necessarily the scientific background for how they analyze the scenarios. So what's in this particular analysis is just one appendix and isn't going to reflect everything that's written in the plan of what we need to do as a goal.
Okay.
But definitely, I'm keep taking notes on this, and I will make sure to get that all back to Brendel so they can make sure they include some language in the plan itself, which is the public facing part of the plan that everyone's going to be reading.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, and Jerry says, don't forget, we need to also work with Spire. Laura, do you have any thoughts around that? I know there was some, differing views in some of these workshops about things like renewable natural gas, compressed natural gas. And I just am also curious kind of how you guys are handling some of those differences of opinions.
Well, at this point, no strategy is necessarily off the table. Specifically, as a city, specifically, we have a wastewater treatment plant that's going to continue to produce biogas, and at this point, we could flare it or we could reuse it beneficially. So it's gonna continue to happen there until we find a technology that no longer happens. So I think at this point we have the strategies. We know that renewable natural gas isn't, if you've read through the strategy scenario analysis, that there's not a whole lot of bang for your buck in that one, in the energy strategies area. So I think it's one of those things that as a strategy, we're keeping everything that's been listed in there, because this is the community's plan and these things were brought forth by community. All of these various ideas were brought forth somewhere in this plan by somebody that lives, works, or plays in Kansas City. And so keeping the idea in there, and then actually how it works out in the next 10 years is kind of technology driven. And I don't know that we're there yet that we can make that determination. And I don't know that taking things out of the plan is going to be the most positive way to do this. But I also don't know what renewable natural gas is going to look like and what that even means in the next 10 years.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think we're on the same page about that. Unless anybody has other thoughts they'd like to say. Okay.
So, Robin, I did want to at least acknowledge that there was a request in the chat, or a question in the chat about if this committee was going to do anything about COVID, utility moratoriums. So I did want to make sure that was at least read into the record. I don't know if we'll have enough time to discuss potential action on that, but I did want to make sure that was at least acknowledged and read into the record.
I mean, that's a great question. I might lean on Beth, who's been more involved in that topic, if she's still available.
Hi, yeah, I am still available. I mean, I definitely think it's something that we should consider. You know, folks who are experiencing utility shutoffs are on the fence lines of the climate crisis and are typically experiencing these shutoffs because they've been, systematically left behind of, retrofitting solutions and other solutions that would drastically lower the energy burden. And so, I think typically in this area, we've seen the utilities voluntarily pass a moratorium. This time last year, Evergy responded to some grassroots requests and passed a moratorium on an internal moratorium on electric utility shutoffs. I believe KC Water has had moratoriums here and there. I'm not really as sure with Spire, but yeah, I mean, I definitely want to +1 the folks who brought it up in the chat, and just say that this deserves the same level of attention and energy as it received when COVID was hitting in March 2020.
So, I mean, Robin or Laura or Andy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but and Beth, correct me if I'm wrong here, but would the request, if I'm understanding correctly, would the request here be for a letter from the committee, asking city council, or maybe not city council, but asking the utilities to consider moratoriums for at least December and January? I just want to make sure I understand, what our potential course of action could be on this front.
Yeah, I think that my interpretation would be that we should send a letter to the utilities themselves. Obviously, I think KC Water, the city does have jurisdiction over KC Water, so that should be theoretically a lower lift, I would think, if the city council would want to coordinate with KC Water. But yeah, I think that sending a letter to the utilities, and I have information that I can provide, and I'm sure several other grassroots groups in the metro do as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Beth. I think I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Jabber Wesley
Jabbar.
had
Jabbar,
Jabbar. I apologize. Please, I think, did you have a question or?
No, I was just going to chime in. I'm with Spire. Yes, we did have moratoriums as well throughout the pandemic as well. Just wanted to chime in on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so, Robin, I personally don't have an issue with drafting a letter, and I think that if this is something that's being brought to our attention, unless there's any major concerns from the fellow committee members, I wouldn't have a problem with supporting drafting a letter to at least KC Water, if not the other utilities. So.
All right. Is that a motion we need to second? I'll second that.
I will make a formal motion that the committee drafts letters to request that the KC Water and other utilities institute shutoff moratoriums at the very least for would the next 90 days be sufficient, or just shut off moratoriums so we can figure out the details at a later time. So
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
This is Ellen. I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Thanks, Ellen.
Okay, well, it sounds like the motion passed. Beth, would you you said that you had templates, would you be willing to provide those to Robin and I so that we can start working on drafting up that language?
I sure can.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Bridget did have a question in the chat that I'd just like to address real quick, because as we're putting together kind of some guiding principles for this, I think maybe it's important to talk a little bit more about renewable natural gas. And when I said I was on the same page as Laura, I agree that the applications like you mentioned, where you're capturing it at the water department or at the landfill makes sense. Where I get concerned is when I hear that gas companies are talking about expanding the production of methane in order to have sources of renewable natural gas. And that it could be a substitute for decarbonization. So I think that our plan, should perhaps distinguish between those. I mean, it sounds like that's where you guys were leaning, but I just wanted to see if there were any more things we should discuss around that.
Robin, I think Bridget has her hand up.
Oh, Bridget, go ahead.
Sorry, again, my dog keeps making a bunch of a commotion by me. But no, I agree with you, Robin. Just because I'm worrisome of like expanding infrastructure for renewable natural gas. Just the infrastructure alone, I just don't think is a great choice. I think that we'll be backpedaling on that issue. Sorry, but that's just, I agree with you.
Robin, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay. Well, so Laura, do you need us to take a formal vote on some of these, thoughts that we've shared today? Or, is there any disconnect between what we've discussed and kind of what was planned for the plan? Or Michael, should we just go through what I have written down?
Which do we think would be more efficient? Because I do want to be somewhat mindful of the time here as well. So.
Yeah.
It can, I mean, if you want to do something formal at this point, you can. If you want to wait until you see the draft plan and kind of how it was outlined, I'm going to take everything I heard today back to Brindle. And if you want to, Robin, we can have Rachel send out what she heard in the minutes, like when she does the minutes, and this is what we heard, needs to go back to Brindle. You guys can say, yes, we captured everything, and then we can just make sure that goes to Brindle. If you don't want to do anything formal at this meeting, either way is fine.
I'd be fine with that step. I think it'll capture most of what we've been trying to say, and so I mean, do we need a formal motion on that sort of step, or you just agree on that?
Andy, you're gonna have to answer that one.
Yeah, I think I don't think they need a formal motion on that.
Okay.
If that's what they choose to wait for.
I mean, if it's in the minutes and you're just agreeing early with what we said was in the minutes, I don't think that there's anything formal needed.
Okay, well, then I'll defer to Robin. She is still the captain of the ship, so.
I think that makes sense to Michael, so.
And remember, the draft plan is just that. It's a draft. It's not set in stone, and very much so. We're going to put it out to you all. We're also going to put it out on the Bang the Table website and allow people to just kind of run it by folks throughout the community. Because we know, working in the city, that you spend a lot of time doing outreach, but then when you actually get something in your hand that people can look at, they come out of the woodwork with comments and concerns and changes. So we've built in a little bit of time for that process.
Okay, well, Laura, thank you, and thanks everyone for the discussion. Are we ready to move on to our last agenda item for today?
Yes.
Okay, so with that, Matt McKinley is here from OEQ to talk about the opportunity to weigh in on the EPA's methane rules that are accepting public comments for the next few weeks. So Matt, are you?
I'm here.
All right. Well, I'll turn it over to you then.
Okay, thank you. Again, my name is Matt McKinley. I'm with the Office of Environmental Quality, and I was asked to bring to the council some information about the EPA. They proposed some new source performance standards for emission guidelines for methane, VOCs, and for methane emissions. And the thing that's kind of different about this is in this iteration, the EPA is going to extend these guidelines all the way to the state, which has not happened before. So I've already put a link in the chat for the EPA's webpage that has the documents addressing this. The comment period closes on the 31st of January, so there's an opportunity to weigh in. So being that there are no real existing new source performance standards at the state level, except for a couple of exceptions, which would be, I believe it's Colorado and California, which they've done it on their own. The states are going to have to work with the EPA to put those in place. And I'm going to put up a graphic that kind of shows you the portions of the industry that are covered and those that are not. Let's see. Here we go. Let me know if you can see that that graphic about the crude oil and natural gas industry. Okay. The blue portion are the production and processing. Those are already existing areas that are covered. The natural gas and transmission and storage section is also covered. But if you look down under distributions, the main services, the city gates and the regulators and meter for customers, those areas are not covered. And those areas will not be covered by this new proposed standard. So the issue that we wanted to kind of bring to your attention is this may be an opportunity to weigh in and have a discussion with the EPA about that portion of the distribution is not being looked at. And for Kansas City with our infrastructure, there's always issues with gas leaks at all levels. So this is kind of the thing that I wanted to bring up to you so that you guys could have a discussion as to whether or not you wanted to participate in those comments. Was there anything else you wanted me to talk about, Robin, or bring any other part of the presentation up?
No, I think that covers it at a good high level. Unless others have questions, any specific questions they'd like more information on.
Sorry, yeah, I do. You were stating, Matt, that the distribution section has never been covered except for in Colorado and California, correct?
That's at the state level. I'm saying that there's never been any regulations for states included in the EPA regulations, except for the ones that were voluntarily put in place by California and by Colorado, and I believe some in Illinois also. But I can't say for certain whether or not even those states covered the distribution portions of the system. For certain, there are some regulations which are very limited for the state of Missouri, but it doesn't really address emissions issues at that level.
So I can speak for California, having just lived there not that long ago, that after the Aliso Canyon big gas leak in 2015, they did require that all gas companies fix all leaks within a certain time frame. So that's within the distribution system as well, because they, did a study showing that the gas that was leaking, every year from within a distribution system was even higher than that massive gas leak at Aliso Canyon. So, so I think what our opportunity here is to weigh in on the new rules for the blue and the orange areas, and voice support for that if we feel that's appropriate. But then I saw in their document, in the EPA's website, that they're also looking for public comments on what's not included. And so then there would be an opportunity to ask them to cover the distribution area, similarly to what I guess is done in California today. Or I guess that would be what we would discuss. So I think we're, I think we're trying to figure out if we should have a special meeting between now and our next meeting to talk about response to this. And so just wanted to see if there was interest in the committee to preparing a response from the committee to this EPA rules. Can't see if there's any. And just go ahead and take yourself off mute. All right, Bridget, I'm going to call on you.
I was just unmuting myself. I was going to say I'm fully in support of drafting language around this. I think especially including that we encourage the EPA to cover the distribution as well. Just because with equity issues as well that we always focus on, and then the volatility. I think that it's important that the distribution, if we have the opportunity to include the distribution portion of this EPA ruling. And so I'm in support of the committee writing a statement or language in support. So just my 2 cents.
And this is Kristen. I would be in support also. Robin, my understanding is that the loss of natural gas through the distribution network is an enormous problem and a major contributor to the greenhouse gases that we're worried about. And so I would be curious to know, do we have any quantification from Matt of the relative impacts of these different parts that are named on this slide?
There is included in the documents on the EPA website an impact analysis study. I did not go into the detail to identify the specific impacts associated with the state, because I don't know that they actually have them, since there's no regulatory overview on those. But there is a multi-page impact analysis available to review.
So even at the national level, it would still be useful to know that if the distribution network casts a very long shadow in this regard, it would be useful to know that, I think. So are you, Matt, are you going to forward us a website or a page to look at?
Yeah, the link to that website is already in the chat.
Okay, sorry about that. I see it.
No problem.
And sorry, I did raise my hand, but I wanted to jump in here real quick before we moved on. This is Christy Engeman. I'm with Spire, and we do actually report our emissions based on our distribution system to the EPA. It's under the Subpart W rule. And as far as the infrastructure goes for our mains and services, we are in a constant rotation of replacing our infrastructure to ensure that leaks are taken care of. And the miles of main that we replace each year is also, we could get that to you, and it's honestly, that's our main objective every year.
It's my understanding, though, Christy, that there's no rules in place right now in the state regulations that require gas companies to fix leaks based on the amount of gas leaking out of them. That not all gas leaks are required to be fixed, and that the criteria for having them be fixed does not include size of the leak. So I guess that would be one thing,
I can't say that there's state legislation, but there are PHMSA rules that we have to follow. And there are various standards for leak classes for how quickly those leaks have to be fixed based on size, as well as proximity to, and this is not my area expertise within the company, but also based on proximity, location to residents, schools, daycares, all of that gets taken into account as far as the size, or sorry, as far as the class of the leak.
Well, it sounds like this is something we can all dig into at a special work meeting, if that's something that we'd like to do, maybe in early January. Since our next meeting would be on the 24th, and then these comments would be due a week later. So, Andy, that's something you said OEQ would support if the committee wanted to do, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. You want to do it as a subcommittee, or we could maybe work out something if someone wants to take a first cut at a draft, and then we would distribute it, collect comments, update the draft, and then send it back to the committee prior to your next meeting to approve the letter at that point, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
We can work out the logistics of it either way.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to make a motion to form a subcommittee to put together that letter before our next meeting in January.
This is Michael Kelly. I will second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion passes. So, Andy, will you and Rachel help us get that scheduled?
Yep.
And I guess if anyone wants to, how should people sign up for the subcommittee?
So I'll send out an email to the whole committee, and then those that want to participate on that will respond in the affirmative. And if we want to do it virtually, then we'll have some dates.
Great. Okay, thank you. Is there any other business before we wrap up today? We're just about at time.
Just wanted to wish everyone a happy holiday season, and hope for a greener 2022.
I second that.
Pandemic-y.
And I guess I'll make a motion to officially adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming, everyone, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.